Hello and welcome to this Silver Stripes screencast. In this lesson we're going to talk about search forms. We'll create a form that can filter our listings by multiple parameters. So just to get into what we'll cover here, first we'll set the expectations of what kind of search form this is going to be, and then we'll make some minor updates to our property object so that it's ready to be searched on, a couple extra properties. And then we will go into create a search results page, and we'll build a search form on that page. We'll apply some filters to a data list and show you how all that works. And then we will pull the results into the template from the search. So, setting expectations, what are we doing here? Well, before we begin, it's important that we set a baseline for what we're looking to accomplish in this tutorial, because search, as you may know, is a real can of worms. Search is an inexact science. It seeks to deliver the user the most accurate results per his or her input. It's a highly subjective thing, and it's therefore always being tuned to increase the likelihood of satisfying the largest volume of users. It's never perfect. We've all had experiences where we've searched for something and it just comes up with results that don't make any sense to us. So this is just the nature of search. You're always trying to refine it and get the most happy customers. Well, to this end, there are a lot of third-party search tools available that do a lot of the work for you when you're dealing with keyword searching, and you can integrate them into just about any database-driven project. Some popular options include Solr, Sphinx, Elasticsearch is really big right now, and even MySQL itself has some basic search functionality that is often all you need. Now, high-powered intelligent keyword searching is perhaps a topic for another tutorial, because in this lesson, while we will be covering search in the academic sense, what we're really talking about is filtering. So unlike searching, filtering should provide expected results 100% of the time, because all you're doing is objectively matching key value pairs in the user's input to key value pairs in individual records that are part of a collection. So, since this is an introductory lesson, we'll be dealing mostly with simple filtering of records, but we will do a bit of keyword matching as well. Just understand that it won't be the optimal free text search solutions for most projects. Now, on an unrelated note, please raise your tolerance level for imperfect visual design. The forms we're going to create will not render markup that is compatible with our style sheet. We have a whole tutorial on customizing forms coming up very soon, and in the interest of just maintaining a single focus for this lesson, that step has been omitted from this tutorial, so forms will look kind of bad. So the next step is we need to make a minor update to the property object. So just to look at what we're dealing with here, let's go to the home page and look at this search form. We see that we have 4 parameters we can use in our search. We have the date of arrival, we have the number of nights, we have bedrooms, which is, I assume, a minimum number of bedrooms, and then we also have a keyword search. Now the last 2 are pretty straightforward, but as for the first 2, we have not made any accommodations for the availability of the rentals. That will come in the future when we add functionality that allows the users to book rentals for a given span of dates. So that is largely going to be controlled by user input. But in the interest of teaching the concept over meeting the requirements of our imaginary website, we're going to create some temporary fields on the property objects that store this data natively on the record. Once users can book rentals, we'll remove these fields, but for now we just want to get this search form working. So let's add the following code. We'll just put an available start field, and we'll call that a date, and also available end will be a date. We'll run dev build, and we'll get some new fields. We'll spare you the trouble of populating values for all those 100 records, so now is a good time to import that import.sql file into your database so that we have some data to search on. The import.sql file populates the available start and available end columns with a random date between now, which is April 2015, and a year from now, April 2016. And the end date is a random value of 1 to 14 days after the start date. So you might have something like the 6th of May to the 12th of May or something in 2015. Now, if you're doing this tutorial beyond that range of time, you may want to update the database manually. Now, in the written part of this tutorial, you'll see a couple of SQL statements you can throw at the database that will automatically generate some random dates. It's just 2 different update statements you have to run. Also in the attached assets, you'll find a assets folder that you should drop into your project. It contains several sample images and files that we'll be using to help fill out our records. The database in import.sql has already been mapped to these new files, so both of these steps should be done concurrently. You should import the SQL file and also drop this assets folder into your project. The last thing we need to do is that our keyword search will need to search on a property description, so we'll just add that field as well. Description will be a text field, and we will just add a text area to the getCMS fields. Run that dev build, and we're ready to go. Now we're going to create a search results page. The page that renders the search results for a property is pretty distinct. In the attached assets for the lesson, you'll find the HTML for a new template called property search results.html. Let's import that into our project. So copy the contents of the file into themes one ring templates layout / property search page.ss. Then, to go with that template, we'll create a new class for the page in my site code called property search page.php. We'll run the dev build and flush because we're modifying the database and we're introducing a new template. Now we'll go into the CMS and change the find a rental page to a property search page. So we'll just browse to the page on the front end and confirm that our template is showing now. All right, let's build the search form now. So there are two search forms on our project currently. We have one on the home page and one on the new property search results page. Let's just work on the search results page for now. We'll create a new method called property search form, and we'll do our best to recreate the fields that are in the template. So I'm just going to start writing some code here that will build out this form. And this is all pretty boilerplate stuff. We've done this before. We passed the this argument as the controller. We passed the method that creates the form, which is property search form. And then I'm just going to create a bunch of text fields. And for each one of these, I do have to add that extra class form control because that's Bootstrap compatibility. And of course, I'm using the placeholder as the label. We're doing some other things like setting the date format on the date picker. Those are just HTML attributes. All right, so most of this shouldn't be new to you, but the one new concept we've introduced here is that we're first building a couple of arrays that we'll need for our drop-down fields. Typically, executing all this before constructing the form is a good idea. If you ever find yourself needing access to these lists beyond the scope of the form, it's often advisable to create them in a separate method. Let's just add the form to the template now. So remove the entire form tag that is representing our static form, and we'll replace it with $property search form. It should render pretty nicely. It's not as nice as the design, but at least it's usable. And we'll clean up that markup later. So you may have noticed that we left out a very important step in building a form. We never updated our allowed actions array to permit the property search form method. And that's because we actually don't need it. Think about what we want from our search form. The user should be able to create a filtered view of results and send it off to a friend, paste it into another browser, or refresh the page. In short, these results need to have their own URL. Now, by default, forms submit through the post method, which works great for handling user input that mutates data on the back end. But all we really want from our form here is a glorified URL creator, right? All the form has to do is redirect us off to a URL that passes all these parameters into a query string, and we will allow the controller to take it from there. Therefore, for this form, we'll use the get method. So let's update the form object to use get. So we just say set form method get. Next, we need to make sure that the form doesn't submit to its handler do property search, and rather it just redirects to the default view in the controller. So let's use set form action as well. And we'll set the form action to the link of the current page. That way you're not posting to the form itself, you're just essentially refreshing the page with these query parameters. So let's test it out. Let's put some data into the form and we'll hit search. Now, needless to say, this should not update the results because those are all static, but do take note of the URL. It looks pretty good, but there's one problem. The security ID parameter does not belong in our URL. Normally, this is used to thwart CSRF attacks, which stands for cross-site request forgery. Since this is a simple GET form, we don't need, nor would we ever want, a security measure like that. The CSRF token, as it is now, would deny another user access to this URL. So let's remove that security token. It's not necessary. So we'll just say disable security token on our form. Refresh the page and give the search another try, and the URL should look a bit cleaner now. Now we need to do something with all this form data, and we're going to apply it to a data list. You might recall from our tutorial on the ORM that these data lists are lazy loaded, which lends itself nicely for applying a variable number of filters. Rather than build a filter clause all in one go, like a big string of SQL, we can take our time and apply each filter independently without having to worry about executing the query. We're going to do all this execution in the index action of our controller. Every controller fires the index action by default, so it's not necessary to add this to the allowed actions array. Every controller knows how to do this. So by default, if no search is applied, we want to return all the property records. So let's start with that. Quick note, we don't have pagination set up yet. We're going to cover that soon. So let's just limit the result set to 20, and this will just be an artificial limit, right? That way we don't have to pull down all 100 properties by default. So I'll just say property get, and we'll pass a limit of 20, and then we will pass a custom variable called results, and we'll set that to the properties data list. So this should be pretty straightforward. We're just looping through a custom variable called results on the template. So now let's start inspecting the GET request. We'll check each parameter and apply the necessary filter for each one. For this section, we'll be using a lot of search filter classes that may be new to you. For a full list of those filters that you can use, look in the framework/search/filters folder in your project, or you can go to the API and just look up search filter. You'll find a lot there. So for the keyword, we're going to use partial match filter to match the keyword in the title. So we'll first check if the request has a get var named keywords, and then we will apply a filter using partial match to the value of that parameter. Now keep in mind, partial match only checks for a sequence of characters in the field, and that's case insensitive. It won't perform any kind of language transformations or parse phrases. A search for CViews will not match a title containing CView. So this gets back to all that stuff we were talking about with search and how it's a really inexact science and a difficult thing to master. That is not what we're covering here. This is just a simple keyword match that looks for a sequence of characters. So that's our keyword. We'll now move on to the date and create our filter for available start and available end. This is getting a bit tricky. In an ideal world, the date would come through the GET request in a proper YMD format, like the kind you see in databases, 2015, 04, 15, something like that for the 15th of April. But our calendar widget isn't set up to submit that way. A more configurable widget might allow us to provide two formats, one for the display to the user and one for the form data. But unfortunately, that option isn't available in this calendar widget, so we need to take the date in DMY format and parse it out. Using PHP's magic method stir to time, we add the number of nights to the Unix timestamp of the arrival date. If you haven't used stir to time before, you should acquaint yourself with that at the PHP documentation page. It's a really cool function. It allows you to pass human-readable manipulation phrases to timestamps, such as stir to time plus 3 weeks, and then against a timestamp. It's a really invaluable tool for date manipulation. So using the two computed YMD dates for the start and end, we apply the greater than or equal filter and a less than or equal filter to search in a range. So let's make an important note here about these user-friendly dates that we're getting. The use of hyphens to separate the date values is critical here. Seems like it should be meaningless, but it's actually really important. PHP's stir to time method disambiguates DMY and MDY dates through the character that is used to separate the values. Hyphens are assumed to indicate DMY, and slashes are for MDY. Okay, so if you look at these two different calls to the date method, we can just get the month, day, and year from these two date expressions. One comes back on the 3rd of July, and the other one comes back on the 7th of March. So same expression, 7/3/2015, but using different separators, we tell stir to time that the date or the month is expected first. Just a very bizarre idiosyncrasy there with stir to time, but you know they have to do something, right? Because 7 and 3 could either be months or days, so you have to disambiguate it somehow. So that note aside, the next 4 filters are really straightforward. We're going to use greater than or equal filter and less than or equal filter to filter by the bedrooms, bathrooms, and price. So I'll just populate all those right now. Get the bedrooms there, and the min price. We'll do the max price. A lot of inspecting the GET request and just applying filters. Now remember, the data list is immutable, so each time we do this, we have to return a new instance of the data list to our properties variable. All right, so let's try searching using some new applied filters. We should still see static results, but notice that the form loses its state on page refresh. That's not good. We'll need to render the form populated with any filter parameters in the request. Since all of our form field names match request parameters, this is exceedingly simple. We're going to load all the variables in the GET request using the getVars method of the request object. Also available is postVars and the all-inclusive requestVars. Since we know we're dealing with just a GET request here, we can just use getVars. Now keep in mind, this magic only works if your form fields share names with request parameters. If our form field was named min bedrooms and the request contained a variable called bedrooms, we would have to assign the value explicitly by using setValue on the form field. But everything lines up, so load data from here is our best friend. Last step is going to be pretty simple now. We're just going to pull all these results into the template. So I'm going to go into my property search page.ss, and right around line 38 here, I'm going to start a loop, and I'll just loop through $results. And I can provide the $link property, the primary photo. I've got a price per night. I'm going to add the title and the region title. And to help with debugging, I'm going to add the available start and available end dates. This isn't something that would ordinarily appear on the listing, but for debugging, I want to know if I'm getting the correct results. So let's do another search, and we'll confirm that this is returning the expected results. Looks good. Everything seems to line up with my search. That is all for this tutorial. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below.